Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is Tacitus here and welcome to this campaign strategy guide for the Britons. Naturally, we'll consider the best strategy for the grand campaign, but we'll also be considering the history and just a little bit of roleplay if you want to spice up this campaign a little. There will also be a battlefield strategy guide following this on Tuesday. In that, of course, we will look at the Briton army in more detail and we'll think how we can use them on the field to take on the Gauls and the Germans in the early game, but also how in the more mid to late game you can take on Rome and the Egyptians, and certainly Egypt were probably the trickiest of all the factions to face when I did my Briton campaign. So what exactly were the Britons then? Because it's kind of hard to put your finger on it exactly. In many ways, they're simply the Celtic people that come from the British Isles. And as with many things in this game, the name itself is the Roman perspective, although, as in many things with Romans, they come from a Greek originally. So there was a Greek geographer named Pythias who in the 4th century BC sailed around the British Isles. We don't actually have any of his writings today now, but the Romans do refer to it several times, so we know a little bit from that period. But frankly, there isn't really any proper history, as you might call it. Indeed, growing up in England myself, I never really learned anything about pre-Roman Britain. Sure, you learn a few small things about Stone Age settlements up in the Orkney Isles like Skara Brae, and of course you learn a bit about Stonehenge. But that aside, there's just this big blank in history between the Stone Age and when the Romans invade. And to be honest, the Bronze Age in many ways is quite an interesting period because Britain is full of tin and iron, which of course is how you make bronze. Now, there's definitely some clear trading with the likes of the Phoenicians all the way over in the Eastern Mediterranean here. So it's interesting that there is such a blank in the histories, but frankly there's just very little written down. All of this means that the Britons are a little bit of a strange faction. We basically have very little history to go for these guys. And they're not really a unified peoples at all. And that might well be true in some ways for the Gauls and the Germans as well. And indeed, kind of what we're seeing here is that element of the game is seen through the Roman vision of things. And that's what we're getting here. We are the people of the islands of Britannia. And likewise, there was trade, there were connections with the people in the north here. This is the territory of Belgica, and this is actually quite well commented upon in the Roman sources. Fierce fighters, lots of resistance. So we'll put them along with the Britons, who likewise like a good uprising. If you want to know more about the Britons and how Creative Assembly were considering them when they made the game, of course you can read their little blurb they've got here, and of course it gives you a little bit of perspective on that, particularly as the Romans really saw the Mediterranean as the central sea of the world. Britannia was this far off, misty, almost mythical island. So the idea of taking on the people from here would be full of these tales of these men dressed in blue woad fighting naked. It's all a little bit ridiculous, but equally that's what the legend tells you. And to some extent, that's what you should embrace when you start playing as the Britons. Be those mythical men from the furthest reaches of the earth and go and terrorise Rome. Oh, Britannia, yes, even look at the map here, stirs me with pride, and indeed it should, because the Britons are incredibly strong on this game. They have themselves a great starter position over here in the northwest corner of the map. Much like England in Medieval 2 Total War, you kind of have yourself a position where, once you've locked down the Isles, you're in an incredibly strong position. No one will really ever attack you. And unlike in Medieval 2, there's no Scotland to worry about. So you can just go grab yourself Ireland and you could sit here forever. But of course, this is Total War, so we should probably go do some warring. Luckily for us, there are the French. I said the French, it's the Gauls, of course, the proto-Frenchies. We're going to go and smash those guys straight away. And it's probably a good idea, to be honest, because you've got the French and you've got the Germans, the good old two enemies of the English. Now, of course, if we use the old toggle foul to go and see what is going on the map here, you will see that actually, the capital Alesia is right here, ready to be sniped off. Now, if you're feeling like a confident player, then what you really do need to do is get your forces and smash straight into Alesia. I'll probably look at specifically taking on that army itself in the field in the Battlefield Strategy Guide. On which note, yes, we do have some very good units indeed, particularly the chariot over here. As I said, I will look into this in more detail in the Battlefield Strategy Guide, but these guys do very much win your auto-resolves very easily. When I did my little No Marrying Reform campaign, well, I say campaign, I did a little run through. When I did a little run through of that, the Britons did actually take over the entire map pretty much, and they won the campaign. These guys do rule it in auto-resolve, specifically when you get the heavy chariots. But nonetheless, we can go and smash forward into the Gauls. But before we go and kill all of the Germans and the French, we probably need to have a little look at our faction tree. And the game, as ever, does give us some nice traits. To begin with, he has intelligent here, and obviously, as the barbarians, traits can be a little bit on the sour side pretty quickly. We don't have academies to go and improve our generals, so often, bloody war is the only way to do it. So yeah, he does have intelligent. Luckily, his children also have inherited that. So they have themselves sharp, sharp, and sharp again. But on the note of bloody war, that does go and give you some problems. This guy already has sanguinary, which is the trait after bloody. Bloody's good for morale, but yes, too much blood, and they get themselves a bit of a dodgy trait in terms of morale. Do be careful with that. It's kind of hard to get a balance with these things, especially as these guys are chariots, of course. When your units are chariots, it's kind of hard to get their experience up without risking their death. Definitely in my half campaign, we lost a few of our generals in somewhat ridiculous fashions. I think some to some boiling oil at some point, which was just ridiculous. I won't ruin all of it, but do go watch the series. It's definitely one of my favourite series I've done here on the channel. The barbarian warlords are pretty powerful, but incredibly flimsy. So I would be very, very wary about sending those guys too much directly into battle. Really, really watch where your general specifically is. With the British Isles pretty much never being invaded, you might as well go and grab your two generals here in York and Anglesey and send them down south to do some good old conquering. There's really no need to leave them around. Sometimes I leave some in Londinium simply because it's a bit bigger and it's worth just managing it well. But to be honest, there's no need to having any generals here. I normally have the most little force possible. So I'd probably go and send these guys straight down south towards Londinium and hopefully get them across the sea in good time. The other thing I'd want to do, of course, is go and send my troops over here to Ireland. Now, Ireland's an interesting one. It's not a very good town at the start of the game, but it does have a port. And population is key. We want to get this nice and early onto our side so that we can start churning out more and more ports. More and more ports means more and more money. And yeah, we've got ourselves ports in all of these towns here. So in many ways, it's an incredible start here for the Britons. Lots of ports and a very, very safe starting position indeed. Of course, if you do want to go and send your troops over to Ireland, you're going to need a boat. And there's only one of them. So the order in which you send troops across the water is going to be down to you. Personally, I think I'd probably be gathering this force in Londinium for a few turns yet. So in Londinium, we can just build ourselves the port and we'll get a boat out there in a few turns. Pretty worth getting the spy across though pretty soon. So I think I'd probably leave the boat here on turn one, send the spy across, and then go from there. We'll build ourselves a second boat in Londinium in good time. On the note of the buildings we should be getting on turn one, yeah, port is definitely the first choice here. Otherwise, it's a bit more of whatever you fancy. None of these towns are big enough to get a port yet. We probably want to be focusing on the growth. This will not take very long. You might want to make it a low tax rate. I probably wouldn't worry about that because there's a few things we're going to do to help that population. And by a few things, I mean taking a few enslaved peoples from Alesia. We'll get to that in a few turns' time. For the time being, though, what do we want to do? Well, David does have itself some mines. 200 a turn is always magnificent. 10 turns, you get your investment back. So if you want, pop the 2 grand straight on there. I think that's probably going to be worth it. In Ibericum, I don't know. I could just get the roads. Honestly, it's really whatever you want to choose at this point. We'll get the roads there, and actually probably a good idea to get the roads over here. We'll be moving our troops around pretty darn soon. But these towns are pretty underdeveloped right now. We've got ourselves a warrior's hold only in these 2 towns. Populations are, 900 here, 900 there, 2,500 here. So Londinium is quite a bit noticeably bigger. But even Summer Believer over here isn't even actually at a large town yet, so we still can't get the port. Growing these will be very much of utmost importance. So as I said, this is where enslaving is a really fantastic mechanic, and one you've really got to bear in mind at the start of the game. Find an early target you can pounce on and use that to your advantage. Unless you're developed, I wouldn't worry about taking population from there. That is already going to be a big town. So when we take that in a few turns' time, well, hopefully anyway, if you manage to take that, it's going to give you a big boost, assuming, of course, you leave your governors in the right place. I would consider leaving my governor in Tara for that. It depends on the timing, really. But yeah, you want to think about where you leave some of your generals, because once you press the enslave button in the town, obviously it will spread between all those places. So have a good think before you take Alesia about where exactly your generals are being left, which towns you want to target with the population. And last few bits and pieces, see us send the diplomat over here towards the Germans. Obviously, if you've got the fog of war on, you wouldn't actually know exactly where they are. But yeah, if like me, you have a big wall map of Rome Total War on the wall, then you know exactly where all the towns are. It's about there, by the way. So otherwise, with a few other troops who need to be doing something, these guys are going to gather their forces up with these lads before we head into Alesia. So probably in the meantime, well worth getting a watchtower or two. So I'll plod one over here in the meantime. We'll send him back over to the city. Obviously sort out all your tax rates as you want them. I normally keep them pretty low when I'm dealing with small towns like this. That's just my choice. You may well want to get some early money in. As for this army, yeah, they won't be able to do anything with Tyre just now. I do have druids, by the way, and these are 2 experienced, so you probably want some extra troops. You should be able to win it perfectly fine, but just be careful. It can be trickier than you think. Last thing what you want to do is go and lose your general, who, as a chariot, very easy to die, of course. You don't really want to lose him nice and early on. He's got lively, fantastic trait for the movement. And yeah, of course, sharp as well. And the retinue. This guy is fantastic. So yeah, do not lose Kunfar early on. That is not a good plan. In the meantime, I'll probably just send him to go and build a couple of watchtowers before the boat arrives for him. But essentially, that's kind of us for turn 1. We've got a little bit of money left in the bank. So even though I love my watchtowers, and at the start of the game, maybe not the best use of your money, I like them. So I'm going to have them anyway. But yeah, we'll go and figure out how we're going to go and attack Alesia, because that's really the key bit of our plan here. You might well notice by turn 2 you're actually losing money, so of course the trade rights for Germany is going to be important. A little reminder to extort your foes. So let's just say about 1200. You can normally get around about 1000 for the trade rights if you're clever about it. Yeah, they took 1200, so that's a good bit of extra money in the coffers. You could also do it with map information. Go around the map, selling it off as much as you like. I tend to like seeing the map, so I tend to just trade map information for map information, but it's worth quite a lot to the AI, so worth extorting it, give you a little bit of extra funds as you start to pull your armies together. By turn 4, things are coming together, and we've got Kunfar on the boat, and the rebel army over here have done exactly what we want them to do, which is go and wander out into the field. Now, yeah, if you can go face them in the field, that'll be perfect, and this means that you can pull these guys into a big battle. With Ireland taken, then it's now time to go and send our troops over to northern France, and turn 4 is exactly when they will have arrived. So we'll grab our army over here. Our spy is now heading over to Alesia. Well worth getting him in there just to see what you've got. Now, at the moment they've got their armies in 2 chunks, which is probably the best way for you to be taking them on. So hopefully they won't jump into the city, but at least we know what's happening over here. So we can go and grab all of our forces together. I would very much leave a single unit in here. You don't want to let the Gauls just walk in. Londinium, yeah, likewise. It is actually happy with no one in there, but, you know, well worth getting something just in case, eh? By turn 5, we'll be hovering over the border of Alesia here, and you might as well, to be honest, go and extort them for a bit of money. I suspect if you offer them trade rights, a bit of map information, you can probably get a good sort of, I don't know, 1800. Let's just have a go at 1800. Why not? We'll see if they're willing to take it. Depends on how much they have. Yeah, they were very happy to accept that. You could probably have got even more. But that does mean we're ready to pounce on them and steal whatever money they still have in their coffers. Of course, if you're about to take Alesia, where are you going to go and get all those slaves? You need to think about where your governors are. And at the moment, we've got 2 over here in Ireland. This guy obviously just took it, and his son has come of age. Wow, I got unlucky with this. He's got lily-livered. That I'd probably just reload, frankly. That's ridiculous. Terrible, terrible roll of the dice on Sinianius. Oh well, let's ignore that problem for now and think about what we want to do with these troops, because there are a fair few here, and to be honest, Tyre can probably sit by itself. I would probably leave one of these lads, and to be honest, this guy's that terrible in battle, I'd probably just go and send him to one of these 3 towns. Think about which of them I want to be growing. Tyre's actually the biggest at this point, I believe. Indeed it is. So yeah, if Tyre is the biggest, perhaps I will leave him over here. Take the rest of my troops and go and send them back down toward the French coast. So grab these guys. It's not very much. Might want to go and fill that with some mercenaries. Hopefully it'll be plenty to go and take those guys out. As the Britons, our major advantage in the upcoming battle is the British light chariots, but you might have noticed we can't actually hire them anyway yet, so we're worth looking at how our building browser works. Now, in order to get those, we are going to need our lovely blacksmith. That gives us the British light chariots. To get that, though, we need the trader. So there are a few things you need to build first and foremost, and obviously the port is going to be your main priority. But I'd probably go port, trader, blacksmith over here in Londinium, because you do want to get out those light chariots ASAP, and this is your only large town at the start of the game. Now, of course, the barbarians are indeed very, very threadbare when it comes to the buildings. It's pretty much what you would expect: basic roads, only level 2 farms. But of course you do get the taverns for a bit of happiness. Frankly though, I tend to find these way too much of a double-edged sword. These give you a ton of bad traits for your generals, all sorts of alcoholic nonsense. Whilst level 1, liking a drink with his mates, is all well and good, it gets bad very, very quick. I tend to just leave taverns in towns like Devon or Bericum, towns that I'm not actually going to leave a governor in. If I'm going to have a governor somewhere, I will almost certainly not build the tavern unless I'm desperate to look after the public order, because these things are really bad for the traits. Just go and look at all the trait files. You'll very soon be put off of those for good. On the plus side, you can at least get yourself the level 2 weaponsmith, which is quite nice. That gives you the British heavy chariots, and only a minor city. You can probably get that in London pretty darn quickly. On which note, you already do have the meeting hall here as a potential building. Swordsmen are a solid unit. I use those well into the later game, to be honest. They're nice to have. Generally more of a garrison by the late game, but they'll still hold their own. Pretty darn good unit before you get your chosen swordsman. Very powerful heavy infantry in the later game. But until we get that, we're going to just have to last with what we've got. And the chariots really are what's going to win you this campaign. So really focus on getting yourselves the blacksmith and up to the weaponsmith. Londinium is going to be such a key point of this empire. You want to get that over there, and Alessia, of course, once you've taken that, should be another place that you can get all these good buildings. This brings us on to the religious temples, and the Britons have themselves a very interesting little selection here, actually. Whilst as a barbarian they only get up to level 3, which is a shame, they do get themselves one of the very rare ones, which is the public health bonus. This is absolutely crucial going forward. We have ourselves no sewers, baths, aqueducts, any of that, so health bonus of 15 is a rare and wonderful thing. You'll probably be building this in a lot of towns. Certainly in my experience on my King Arthur campaign, I was building this all over the place in the end. And yeah, not only that, health bonus and obviously the happiness of 15, but the druids as well. Next up is the Sacred Circle to Britannia, and whilst this is perfectly good in itself and increased to tradable goods, I almost never choose it, and that's mainly because the other two are better. Public health bonus and druids, of course, we've already said are great, but the Sacred Circle to Andrasta gives you +2 to experience. And to be honest, when you're playing as barbarians, yeah, giving yourself that boost to experience is very much going to be a priority. Now, which of these two you pick is a bit of a flip up, because it can be tricky. You want the health bonus in the bigger cities, but if you've got a big Roman city with a full-on armoury, then yeah, you kind of want to be getting troops out of there, don't you? So it's a hard one to choose sometimes, but certainly I very rarely end up picking the Sacred Circle to Britannia. The other thing you get from Andrasta, though, are these two very unique units. Once again, the Britons get all sorts of fun units. Road Warriors, more of a starter game unit, really. They do take 2 turns, so you probably won't have many of them, but I like them covering themselves in their blue woad. And 14 attack, very nice to have. Fast moving, good stamina, good morale. Pretty darn good at the start of the game, even if 2 turns is probably not going to mean you get very many of them. But the head hurts. Oh, the head hurters. We're going to enjoy these when we go on to the Battlefield Strategy Guide. These have all sorts of abilities. But the missiles, yeah, the quicklime covered heads, absolutely ludicrous and wonderful, all in equal measure. You're going to be using these quite a bit. I do like these behind the lines. The Britons are very much a make the enemy rout kind of kind of faction, and these guys really add into that significantly. Bonus experience as well at the level 3 temple here, so +3 head hurlers. I think I was pumping these out of Italy on my King Arthur campaign. I absolutely love it. You're going to be using lots of these guys, so Sacred Circle to Andrasta, you're definitely going to pop these around in a few of your cities where you're going to make sure you're getting lots and lots of troops. Once you take Alesia, then you'll be able to enslave the population. Now, 1,900 is quite a lot. Definitely more than we need over in Tara. So, yeah, one governor in one city is probably a massive overkill. So, 3,500 now for Tara. Way too much. What you might want to do instead then is make sure a second general is in one of your other cities. Or go and take Condate Redonum over here before you go and enslave all the peoples. But with Alesia, we've now got ourselves another huge town. We've crippled the Gauls in many ways, and we can kind of plot our next move. With Alesia in hold, we've got another 2,000 population city that we can start getting some good troops out of. Now, this is fairly well developed actually in many ways. Can't actually get any of my good troops, but 3 turns to get my swordsman, I'm probably going to go straight for that. And from here, yeah, hopefully we can start to smash up the Gauls pretty darn quickly. Once you've taken Alesia, the world really does start to open up to you. Of course, the main focus is probably going to be on Gaul, but you might well find that the Germans start to stab you in the back, and that's exactly what has happened here. It's normally by this time that they do that, and to be honest, you should be absolutely ready for it. We've got ourselves lots and lots of chariots being pumped out of Londinium. There you can hop on the boats and come and join the attack. Likewise, I've got myself swordsmen out of Alesia. We can keep on pumping those out, and along with the war dogs, always helps with the morale. In fact, we're starting to get the head hurlers too. Our army is coming together, and at this point, whilst their banner looks very big, you'll probably find if we head up to them that they are mostly war bands, and actually we've got quite a few chariots to go and chop them apart. Now actually, one thing I'll probably mention in the Battlefield Strategy Guide is how the split warbands can be very awkward, particularly with the chariots. If you've watched my series, they are difficult indeed. The Germans are actually easier to face when they get more developed and once they have the axemen, which is part of the reason I would suggest that you don't attack them straight away, because they're a bit more awkward with their phalanxes. Nonetheless, you can still wangle your way around it, shoot them with missiles, hack them down with slingers and dogs, and you can make it work. I certainly think Gaul are a lot easier to attack, which is why I would suggest going for them first. But at this point, our economy is looking good. We've got troops being pumped out of towns. We've got a really, really good core empire, which is looking safe, producing us lots of money. And to be honest, we can kind of take this whichever direction we want. As for roleplay opportunities, I think it has to be the King Arthur campaign. Honestly, one of my most enjoyable series on the channel, and it really didn't take all that much to go and set up. I gave myself a few cataphracts, which kind of acted as our Knights of the Round Table, and King Arthur, along with some other name changes, would go and fulfill all of the Arthurian legends. So the likes of Kai is here, the likes of Bedivere. We even have ourselves a Morgana. Oh yes, this was a marvellous campaign. Really enjoyed kind of putting myself in that position, getting in the range of the chariots a few centuries early and preventing the Romans ever making it to Britannia at all. If you wanted to play this for yourself with all the name changes and the knights, for example, I do have guides on how to change all of these little bits and pieces. I do find the Britain campaign is particularly fun anyway, but this has added an extra flavour to it. Very much enjoyed this. I would recommend it, but I do have one other suggestion for a particularly unusual campaign. Here we are back outside Alesia on turn 5, but this time the cogs of history might just turn the other way. Indeed, we're going to head back towards Samabreva and leave the proto-Frenchies alone, because really what we want to do is go and be like Egypt in Civ 5 and just, build things. Let's have peace. I know it's total war, but let's just sit around and wait for the Romans to attack us, which might take a while, but it can be a fun way of playing it. And I say fun, in inverted commas, I suppose. It's one of those slightly over-the-top nerdy things that sometimes you just have to do as a bit of an experiment. But you certainly can sit up here and build up your economy, build up your infrastructure, and wait for it to come your way. Now, I did do this as Armenia once. But with Armenia is, you just kind of get onslaughted by Egypt eventually. And I had probably about 100 turns of that before the Romans even turned up. So, that's Britain. You can sit in your corner. I would probably suggest keep this because, the Romans might not even ever bother crossing the water. nonetheless, one day eventually they'll come and you'll have yourselves rows of forts ready to go and beat them away from the gates. How did it all go down for the Britons in history then? Well, I can tell you it certainly didn't quite go like this. This is what happens when you get rid of the Marin reforms. No, it wasn't quite this glorious for Britain. Their time would come later. But in reality, what happened was they sat on their little island and they scored with each other. Julius Caesar would actually invade in the 50s BC. He kind of won a battle here or there and then kind of went back. So in some ways you could see it as a failed invasion. But to be honest, the whole idea of even ending up in the British Isles and battling some of the savages there won him enough kudos where he kind of claimed it as a sort of victory anyway. The real invasion would come about a century later in AD 43 when Emperor Claudius felt like, well, you know, he needed to prove himself as emperor. Let's go off and conquer Britain, he said. And so he did. And that made him seem like a good and powerful emperor. Not that he really did an awful lot. He kind of, I think, showed up at some point and had a big temple built in his honour in Camulodunum, which is one day Colchester. Quite why that's not the main town here, I don't know. It was the capital of Roman Britain. But anyway, that aside, it's all fine. Never really went over to Ireland, by the way. Ireland would remain as it was. I know Dara Brian, Irish comedian, did comment on how he's very sad that the Romans didn't, because frankly he's like, their history is boring. Be much more interesting with all the Romans turning up. But there we go. The light at the top here, of course, would be kind of chopping through Scotland, and whilst there were forays into the Scottish parts of Britain, generally speaking the Romans couldn't really be bothered. It was only really invaded to sort of show off anyway, so no point. Eventually Hadrian would of course build the wall, Hadrian's Wall, across the length of this chunk of Britain here. It's close to the modern day border of England and Scotland. It's actually very close to the border in this corner over here. It actually ends up about 50 miles from the border further in the east. But that is basically what the map looks like it is, because this is basically what the Romans conquered of Britain. Sure, there will be uprisings that live long in the memory, such as that of Boudica in 60 AD. She burnt down Camulodunum, Verulamium, Londinium, but in the end it was put down. It didn't really make all that much of a difference. Indeed, if actually you want to learn more about this particular era, Tacitus is a great source for this. Tacitus is one of the most well-known Roman historians, and his father-in-law was Agricola. The book Agricola is named after him. He was actually the guy in charge of much of the conquest of Britain, so it's a very good source of information for it. So if you want to know more, definitely look at a bit of Tacitus. But yeah, basically the uprisings weren't very long-lived at all. The Romans would be in charge until 410 AD. In that fateful year of 410 AD, the Romans genuinely just decided to leave. They took their troops and decided, we need these back in Rome. Bye, have your freedom. And by their freedom, they basically meant leave you here to die without being defended. Because very soon, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes would all come over from Scandinavia and all of this land in between, and they would go and take over much of modern day England. I say England because pretty much the borders that they drew are almost exactly the borders with Wales today. That is what has basically decided what is England. So if anyone's got any complaints about England specifically, send the complaints to the Romans, because it's their fault. Thank you for joining me today on this campaign strategy guide to the Britons. I do think the Britons are one of my favourite campaigns in Rome Total War, and I don't think it's just because I'm British myself, and it's not just because the armies are a lot of fun either. I think it's also their position. They've got themselves a kind of position where you don't get taken on by 7 different foes and kicked to death in the corner instantly. You can kind of build slow if you want. You can just camp there forever should you wish. But you don't get drawn in by Rome right at the start. You can grow your campaign and take your time. And I like the fact that I've got that flexibility. But whichever faction you want to see next is all in your hands. Do put in the comments below what you want to see. Tell me why you want to see that faction, because honestly at the moment I don't really know which faction I'm going to do next. You tell me what you'd like to see and I'll have a little look-see. I've got 1 or 2 ideas from previous comments on the earlier guide videos, but again, tell me your faction and why you want me to look at them, and that hopefully will be the next one that I look at. That's all for now then, ladies and gentlemen. I will leave you. I'm Thomas, this is Tenerity Human, and this has been our campaign strategy guide to the Britons. Thank you, and goodbye.
Go, my puppies, go! Hunt down the German dogs.
My chariots are complete lunatics! Stop charging into the spears! Stop charging into the spears! Why do these guys not break? Everyone else has fled! Go home! Go home! What is happening at the chariots?